Good morning, everyone. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the fourth edition of the Nigerian Hydrogen Future webinar series this morning. I believe you're all ready to learn this morning and you have expectations, and I know that you would have a lot of enlightenment after this session this morning. So we have it's 10:05 right now, and we will be jumping right into the session. I will be delighted to let you know how it's going to go. But first of all, I would have my colleague. Before I go on, my name is Sharon Rehoboth. I'm sure you can see it on the screen already. I am Sharon Rehoboth. I'm the program manager at the Competence Center, Energy and Environment here at the Delegation of German Industry and Commerce in Nigeria. And this webinar is brought to you by the Delegation of German Industry and Commerce in Nigeria in partnership with the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. You get to hear more from them in the course of the webinar. So right on time, I would hand over to the head of the Competence Center to make a brief introduction. So thank you, Andrew Aye. Hi, Andrew. Can you unmute, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew. I am the head of the Competence Center, Energy and Environment, with the Delegation of German Industry and Commerce in Nigeria. I really look forward to this event, and I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to this event. Just a brief introduction of what the Competence Center does, and then I will just hand over to my next colleagues. So what we basically do, the Competence Center does, is we basically are focusing primarily on unearthing investment opportunities in the clean energy space. So we are looking at opportunities within the solar, wind, bioenergy, energy efficiency, and now hydrogen as well as waste management. So we are actually trying to establish relationships between the key public and the private sector players that will also, again, enable private sector investments in these areas. So basically, that's what we do. And again, hydrogen has been one of the prime topics recently. And thanks to the Konrad Adenauer Stifftung Foundation, who is basically supporting us or helping us actually organize this event. So again, my great appreciation to Konrad Adenauer for actually helping us facilitate this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much. All right. I will be introducing Anya. Anya will be giving us the welcome address. Thank you, Anya.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and very warm welcome and good morning to everyone in the audience, and obviously also to our speakers. My name is Anya Beretta. I'm the head of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Regional Program on Energy Security and Climate Change. I'm very pleased to read you all this morning. Just a few words on KAS. Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is a German political foundation. We are funded by the German government, and our objective is to create, let's say, the overall objective to create an enabling government to allow more clean energy policies or better clean energy policies in sub-Saharan Africa, but also to promote technology transfer, peer-to-peer learning, and enable discussions on topics that are relevant in that sphere. And hydrogen obviously is one of those topics that has been around for some time now. We have seen obviously an acceleration of interest, unfortunately due to the crisis, to the invasion of Russia, of the Ukraine, and the question, how can we generate energy security not only in Europe, but obviously also in Africa. And I'm very pleased that we managed this morning to have a discussion that is a bit more concrete when it comes to hydrogen, because hydrogen, as you know, the opportunity to save the energy deficits that we have in many African countries for some time has been around. But we really want to take a moment and look at some very specific and concrete details around hydrogen. And one obviously is safety. How safe is this technology? How can we, you know, make sure that the technologies we use are as safe as possible? And that is what we're going to discuss this morning. And I'm very pleased that Mr. Holt-Appels from BAM is here to give us some more insights on that. But also when we speak about how can we trade and how can we create a win-win situation between African countries and Europe when it comes to export of hydrogen, I'm very pleased that we have Ms. Seiler this morning with us, who will explain a bit on, you know, how the markets are structured in Europe and how we can really guarantee that both parts benefit from this. And we obviously do understand that the private sector will play a key role in hydrogen production, and this is why we also invited Mr. Olanyaran, who will also shed light on that aspect. I'm probably the least knowledgeable person on hydrogen in this panel. So without further ado, I will hand back over again to the colleagues from AHK, and also from our side, from CAS side. Thank you very much for organizing this seminar. And I'm very much looking forward to this discussion this morning. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Anya. Thank you. All right, I will go ahead to introduce the first speaker, Dr. Kai Hottapels. But before I make a formal introduction, I just want you to know that this session is going to be very interactive. We want to, as much as possible, ensure that you're not just attending the webinar, but really going back with something. So a link will be dropped on the chat right now, and it's a Slido link, so it helps you to put forward your questions. So for every presentation, you can actually put forward your questions, and we will see them and we will act accordingly so you can get the answers. All right, so moving forward this morning, I will be introducing our first speaker, Dr. Kai Hottapels. So Dr. Kai is the spokesman of the Competence Center Hydrogen Safety at BAM, and he's also the head of division Consequence Analysis of Substances and Energy Releases at the Federal Institute for Materials Research and Testing, BAM. He also coordinates the hydrogen activities at BAM at the German Federal Institute for Materials Research and Testing. He has also driven lots of projects at the consequence analysis of substances and energy. This morning, Dr. Kai is going to be talking to us about the overview of hydrogen safety and the remaining challenges in a green economy and energy transition. So thank you very much, Dr. Kai. You now have the floor.
Many thanks, Sharon, for introducing me. So let me share my screen first. So now you should be able to see my screen. So you will find finally a lot of details mentioned here in the slides. I'm not able to go through all of them in detail, but you will be able to get all the slides afterwards. And if there are any questions afterwards, not only for today, you can get in contact to me. So Sharon already mentioned, I would like to introduce you briefly to the state of the art regarding hydrogen safety. But when talking about hydrogen safety, there are still some remaining challenges we have to solve. The title of this presentation is Remaining Challenges in a Green Economy and Energy Transition. Please keep in mind, I will focus always on the main topic, safety. A brief introduction to my person, not necessary anymore. Sharon did it very well. Many thanks for that. Just to mention, the Federal Institute for Materials Research and Testing is a governmental institute. We belong to the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, and therefore we are of course very busy in all the activities done on that field as well. The Contents of my talk will be, okay, some general remarks about safety. There is always a little bit different understanding what is meant by talking about that. I will give you some key facts talking about hydrogen safety in special, and will then come to identified knowledge gaps. Here for this part especially, I'm not talking as PAM member, so the gaps I would like to present are finally the conclusion of a large network in Germany with more than 1,500 members, where we identified those specific topics where we still have to solve some problems. And finally, a short conclusion, a summary will be given at the end. Yeah, to start with the general remarks, there is of course no absolute safety. I hope you can all agree to that. We are trying to achieve a 100% safety standard, but that will never be the case. But we are talking a lot about the acceptable risk which we can undergo by talking about hydrogen applications over the whole value chain. Nevertheless, we never will reach an absolute safety. But another global remark is hydrogen is neither safer nor unsafe compared to other flammable gases or liquids. That is a big misunderstanding we are talking about very often. But finally, you have to deal with a flammable gas, and you have to look to some specific facts, specific behavior of hydrogen. But this is the same if you have to deal with LNG or with propane. But where do often public concerns usually come from? That is quite easily to explain, because if there is something new, we are always somehow concerned. That is simply human nature. And I plot here a picture which demonstrates a situation in 1783, where the population of a small village fought against something new, which was nothing else than the first hydrogen balloon, which was started in Paris. But it was that new, everybody was afraid, hey, that is a diabolic device, and started fighting against it. And that is the situation we have to deal with. And furthermore, I already mentioned it in the beginning, everybody defines safety differently. You have to take safety, of course, very seriously, but everybody has a different understanding. Here, two pictures where I guess the people clearly demonstrate that they have a different understanding what is really a safe situation. But you can easily overdo safety. That is demonstrated in the right picture here. So finally, you always have to take care of that safety should always be in a reasonable proportion to the risk. And that is the outcome of detailed risk analysis, which is always required independently from hydrogen issues. We are a little bit afraid now with the market ramp up we try to implement in Europe and all over the world, that the number of hydrogen applications will rise dramatically, I would say, and therefore accidents will occur. But we have to be prepared if such accidents will start, and there are already some examples given here on the slide where finally hydrogen was somehow involved, but only in the left side of the slide you can see a real scenario, a real accident where hydrogen finally caused this accident, because the gas cylinders used for hydrogen storage were not able to hold the pressure for a long time due to interactions with the materials. That was, by the way, the kickoff of BAM's hydrogen safety work, because one of the founders of our institute were asked to examine this accident systematically. Looking to especially the scenario plotted here at this area, an explosion which took place in Norway, it was simply the fact that the gas storage system, a gas vessel, was untied. So finally, a flammable gas was released. There was an explosion scenario. Fortunately, nobody was seriously hurt. There was only a damage of the infrastructure, which finally was detected. But the consequence was that Norway stopped all activities. They closed all hydrogen refueling stations for 1 or 2 weeks. They didn't sell any fuel cell cars anymore. So a simple cause for the accidents, an untight screwing of a gas vessel, had dramatic consequences to the economic things which are connected to hydrogen refueling stations. So we have to prevent those events. And that no concerns will finally will come up and hinder us or barrier the large-scale market ramp up we are looking for. So we always have to keep in mind the social acceptance. The population of our countries have to be educated somehow that they are familiar to those risks which can occur in combination with hydrogen. So let's have a short look to the state of the art. There are many facts and figures already well known for hydrogen. We are dealing with hydrogen for more than 100 years, especially the chemical industry and the nuclear power plants are very familiar to that. So it is nothing new in principle. And a lot of physical chemical information are already available, and I would like to present some of them and try to evaluate them briefly. It is well known that hydrogen has a very large explosion region, mentioning that the lower explosion limit is at about 4 volume%, the upper explosion limit up to 77 volume% in air. So comparing it to hydrocarbons, you usually have an upper explosion limit of about 20 volume%. So it is minimum 3 to 4 times larger in case of hydrogen air mixtures compared to typical hydrocarbons. Nevertheless, for risk evaluation, you often use the lower explosion limit, especially to take care of gas alert systems. And this lower explosion limit is finally comparable to natural gas. Therefore, we often evaluate it not negative, not positive. It's simply a fact you have to deal with. Yeah, looking to the ignition energies of hydrogen air mixtures, you do not need that much ignition energies, but you also have to consider how realistic is the occurrence of an ignition source in your system and how probable is that the ignition source is an effective one. And if we compare the ignition probability, for instance, to acetylene, a well-known gas for welding, then we have to say the ignition probability for acetylene is much higher than for hydrogen air mixtures. Nevertheless, due to the very low ignition energy, this fact must be somehow evaluated very critically. Then we know that hydrogen itself, once released, has a very low density, it is very volatile. So therefore, once released, and if it is not captured anywhere under the roof of a building or something else, then it travels away quite quickly with about 0.5 meters per second. So the situation can be cleared quite quickly. That is definitely advantageous. The same to the ignition temperature, which is a value for the surface temperatures required to ignite in hydrogen air mixture. This ignition temperature is very high, and you usually have not to deal with that high surface temperatures of more than 560 degrees C. Once again, it's advantages. Then I would nearly mention it as a muse and fairy tale when talking about the Joule-Thomson effect. Looking only to the safety aspect of the Joule-Thomson effect, we always have to explain, once pressurized hydrogen is released, of course, it is not cooled down due to this negative Joule-Thomson effect. It can be heated up, but this effect is very small. And calculating, for instance, an release of 300 bar hydrogen, which is stored in, for instance, any gas stock, if it is released to the atmosphere, the gas flow will be heated up by about 9 Kelvin. And if you keep in mind that you need more than 560 degrees C, those 9 Kelvin are a quite small amount. If you are not working already at more than 550 degrees C, that negative Joule-Thomson effect does not influence the safety in a really critical way. Where it comes more, where it is of higher interest is, of course, if you want to liquefy hydrogen, then this negative Joule-Thomson effect requires much more energy compared to other gases. And you have to deal with a specific combustion behavior, but we can evaluate it very neutrally. You have a fast deflagration, you can have also detonation effects. That is well known, but already a lot of technical solutions already exist to handle those scenarios where they can occur. It is very unlikely that those critical detonation effects really occur if hydrogen is only released. That is a specific topic if you have to deal with applications itself where you can have hydrogen, especially in mixture in combination with air or oxygen. Last but not least, we are often discussing the interaction with different materials. That is, of course, a negative effect you have to deal with, but you have to do the same if you look to other gases, for instance, corrosive gases. That is simply a fact. You have to deal with that topic. You have to choose the right materials which do not undergo those reactions, and then you can easily handle this fact. Nevertheless, you have to keep it in mind, and it's somehow a negative evaluation we have to do at this point. Yeah, just to mention it at the end of those facts, we are looking to hydrogen safety for decades meanwhile. So a lot of systems, a lot of information are already available, but we do not have to reinvent the wheel. I already mentioned that a lot of knowledge is available in the chemical industry, in the area of nuclear power plants, because they are cooling down systems with liquid hydrogen, for instance. So we have to combine all the available knowledge we have in different areas and define, or we have to identify finally the gaps I will come to a little bit later on. And our recommendation always is, if you start a development of any kind of technology, please keep safety, or start to think about safety aspects directly from the beginning, because once the application, the technology is developed, and you then start with a risk analysis and come to the conclusion that you have to change anything in your application, in the technology itself, it can be a problem. It can raise costs for the development, for the technology itself dramatically. So start thinking about safety directly from the beginning. There are many experts available worldwide which can give a lot of support to those issues. Yeah, I already mentioned I would like to give you a feeling for the identified knowledge gaps. This is not only done by BAM itself. I mentioned the German Hydrogen Research Network with more than 1,500 experts coming from economy and science, of course. We prepared recommendations, especially for the German government. They hopefully will use our recommendations to overwork now the national hydrogen strategy. It is announced to be published end of this year. We are looking to that. Of course, so far we are working according to all the topics mentioned in the actual national hydrogen strategy. And one big knowledge gap is, of course, to find the right materials and to guarantee that the materials you choose in different applications and technologies are able to do their job over the whole lifetime of the technology of the application itself. That is a big issue, because what is the right test method to identify those materials and based on the results, doing an evaluation that those materials will be able to withstand, for instance, high pressures, high temperatures in hydrogen atmospheres for decades, and not only for 1 or 5 years, for instance. So to decrease directly from the beginning the maintenance costs, for instance, and also to evaluate how often you have to do maintenance in your technology itself. It's not that easy to define and to develop the right test methods. One quite new one is shown here on the right side. You have a kind of stress test for the materials. It's a small pipe where you can apply a gas pressure inside, and then to put some stress just by putting the ends into the opposite direction. And in case the pipe itself is filled with hydrogen, that is plotted here in the diagram on the right bottom, that it will fail earlier than if, for instance, argon is provided to the hollow pipe itself. This can happen if the material is not able to withstand or is going or undergoes some interactions with hydrogen, but we already have a kind of catalog available which materials are able to withstand especially high pressures, high temperatures of hydrogen. Nevertheless, a lot of new materials are always developed, and therefore you have to qualify those materials before you use them. And finally, we are often discussing also methods how to do a continuous monitoring of your application itself, so that any kind of defect which can occur during the entire lifetime is detected as early as possible, and that a dramatic scenario, a consequence of a failure, of a critical failure, can be prevented. Then a big issue is talking about liquid hydrogen. It is a very cold liquid which has to be stored at minus 250 degrees C. Nevertheless, we are talking, especially in Germany, but I think in Europe as well, that we need to import huge amounts of an energy carrier, and one option is to import it as liquid hydrogen. The other option is to transport ammonia. There, different risk analysis has to be done, but it is quite new to deal now with large amounts of liquid hydrogen. And actually, for the shipping transport, only one ship already exists, which is traveling from right between Japan and New Zealand. There, a lot of information will be collected. But there are other critical situation scenarios you have to evaluate properly, especially during the transferring of liquid hydrogen that will occur, for instance, at a terminal in a harbor. You have to transfer liquid hydrogen from a stack to the ship itself. This is done by pipes, and these can rupture due to different reasons, but that is an accidental scenario you have to evaluate, because once liquid hydrogen is released, you have to think about safety distances. Is it distributed in a closer area where the accident took place? What are consequences? And dealing with liquid hydrogen means also you have to do a lot of pre-normative research. A lot of information are not available, and it is not that easy to handle those that very cold liquid. Nevertheless, we did it end of last year in a scenario which I already explained, and you will see now a video. They are both working at the same time. That once liquid hydrogen is released on a surface of water, a harbor situation to mention it, we have a lot of turbulence, and finally what we detected and didn't expect it is that an ignition took place. It was not ignited by any known ignition source. It happened spontaneously. It happened 20 times by doing 22 tests. So this is a scenario we have to consider and to evaluate. So finally we did, or based on all the measurements we did, based on the values, overpressure in different distances to that ignition event, heat measurement, and those things, we finally come to the conclusion, the consequences whereby we had a clear explosion as it was recognizable here, the consequences are limited to the surrounding, to a distance of about 10 to 20 meters from the ignition source, from the ignition itself. So coming back to the harbor situation, in about 20 meters around such a pipe, no people will be located. You are talking about large distances to an urban area, I guess more than 100 meters. So it seems to be somehow safe to deal with those effects, but nevertheless, some further research is necessary to do that, or to finally evaluate the situation. Closely linked to that topic is leak detection. We have a lot of new and digital methods how to determine hydrogen concentrations in much better ways than we had, let's say, 10 years ago. Meanwhile, we are often talking about virtual realities, augmented realities, digitalization, and all these things finally enable us to build up networks of sensors, of sensors which are working differently, so that you can have a lot of advantages, that you do not have to detect hydrogen only in one place. You can think about area and volume-based detection of hydrogen releases. You can evaluate the potential risk of such releases in a much better way. And by combining different sensor types together to a network, and if one of those sensors, for instance, fails, you can hopefully compensate the failure of one single sensor, because you still have enough information available to evaluate the situation properly. You do not have to carry out a shutdown of your technology, of the system. You can go ahead being operative and just do some maintenance on the single sensor, change it, and you are always in a safe situation. These are advantages we see for the future to determine new concepts of leak detection and monitoring, whereby there was still a lack of sensors which are able to determine cryogenic hydrogen, because at very low temperatures, most sensors do not work properly. It already starts, for instance, not only for hydrogen concentration measurements, it can also be the place for temperature measurements. If you want to detect temperatures below -200 degrees C, you do not have a very validated measurement at this time. Yeah, leak detection can be done also by using new technologies like drones, aerial-based robotics, or land-based robotics. That is research topic BAM is doing as well. But let me briefly jump, looking to the time remaining, to some other knowledge gaps. Protection concepts is one knowledge gaps. We already had a lot of information available. I mentioned that for the industrial sector, for nuclear power plants. But once the market ramp up is full in action, a lot of those technologies will be transferred to the public, and the population usually is not very familiar to hydrogen technologies. They are somehow concerned. Therefore, we have to think about new protection concepts which are realistic if non-educated persons are in contact to the new technologies. It's not that easy. It is closely linked to the whole education area, education and training area. That is another gap we already identified, but that is a fact worldwide. We are actually doing a lot of work to determine or to validate different models for the calculating of hydrogen releases, liquid hydrogen, gaseous hydrogen up to 1000 bar. Just to validate those calculating models, this is another knowledge gap which is present. Yeah, knowledge transfer is something I already mentioned. It is a central element to educate and train people, not only scientific stuff. We have to train also. One of the commission which visited BAM mentioned it, hey, we do not need only PhDs, we also need PhDs. So trained people which are familiar to safety aspects of hydrogen, dealing with hydrogen. And that is something we are picking up those topics by promotion of young academics. We're looking to concepts in education and research, working together with different universities and other institutions. But we do not have to forget, of course, the fire brigades. They are the first ones, the first responders, which are present in case of accidents. They have to be trained as well. There are a lot of different stages we have to deal with. Only to keep it in mind, knowledge transfer by all the developments we are doing, by all research which is done, we have to transfer that knowledge to different areas. Yeah, regulation code and standards, I would like to skip this for the moment due to the time. Acceptance and risk communication I already mentioned as well briefly. Let me close finally my presentation with a very brief introduction to the Competence Center mentioned in the beginning. H2 Safety at BAM, founded in 2020. We are picking up a lot of those knowledge gaps I presented. We are looking to the materials, we are looking to certification issues, especially in systems where pressurized gas is stored. We are looking to process safety. I presented liquid hydrogen as one issue, and we are looking also to sensor technologies, and we are certifying reference materials. And one main area where we are doing this in Germany is our test site. We are very glad to have this infrastructure available. It's a 12 square kilometer large size with an existing infrastructure, and our main activities will be done here in this field, test field, 400 meter in diameter, and we will build up a lot of installations there to offer finally tests, to do research, and also to do education and training at the site at different or for different applications itself. Yeah, let me conclude briefly the presentation. Hydrogen safety is not a barrier to the introduction of energy carriers to our technologies. I hope you got the right feeling that this is the main fact I would like to offer, which I would like to introduce you. The safe handling of hydrogen is, of course, possible. We already did a lot of research for the past years, and we just have to combine the existing knowledge, and then we are pretty sure, we are convinced, we means at this time BAM, hydrogen systems can be as safe as systems using any other conventional energy carrier. We just have to take care of different topics like dissemination of knowledge and the competence and safety culture to all stakeholders. We have to consider in the hydrogen value chain itself. For the moment, I have to thank you for your attention, and I'm open to questions now or also anytime later on. Many thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kai. Really insightful session. I mean, I didn't know how broad for that session on the chat, asking if this webinar was going. This not just answers the question for the person, but for everyone else in attendance. Yes, the link to the webinar will be shared with you subsequently, and also the webinar will be hosted whenever you need to. Okay, and I'm looking forward to the second presentation. Also, I believe you can see that there's a poll going on the screen. Please just let us know where you're participating from, and if you're already active in the hydrogen production, would really appreciate your responses. Thank you so much. And for those that are just joining us, welcome. Yeah, you've missed a great deal, but like I said, you will get the recording soon, so you can bring yourself up to speed. Okay, so moving forward to our second speaker, I have the pleasure of introducing Katharina Seiler. Katharina Seiler works as a senior expert for the renewable energy at the German energy agency, DINA. She focuses majorly on hydrogen certification, calculations of hydrogen production costs, and forecasts of greenhouse gas quota prices until 2030. Prior to her current position, she worked for 2 years at the Leibniz Institute for Agricultural Engineering and bioeconomy as a research associate in the EU project Advance to us about sustainability requirements for the hydrogen exported to the EU. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Katharina. Katharina, please.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you very much to the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and also to the delegation of German Industry and Commerce in Nigeria for inviting me today. I will just quickly share my slides. Okay, do you see the slides now in full screen?
Yes, we do.
Yes, Katharina.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you very much. So my name is Katharina Seiler, and I work as a senior expert for renewable gases and bioeconomy at the German Energy Agency. And today I will talk about sustainability requirements for renewable hydrogen, or also called green hydrogen, exported from, for example, Nigeria to the EU. But before I start, I want to take the time to also introduce, of course, the German Energy Agency to you, which is an intermediary between politics, industry, and science, and also society. And it is a platform for dialogue with stakeholders from various industries and fields. We are also a partner and initiator of the federal government for its energy and climate policy strategy. And we also are an enabler of the energy transition in concrete projects domestically and abroad. So I want to start with the regulatory framework in the European Union. So here there is a distinction between low carbon power fuels and renewable power fuels. So low carbon power fuels could be, for example, blue hydrogen, and this is regulated within the gas decarbonization package, which aim is the aim is to realize a 70% greenhouse gas reduction compared to a fossil baseline. And then the renewable power fuels are regulated by the Renewable Energy Directive 2, in short RED 2. And in the European Union, the term used for renewable power fuels is the abbreviation RFMBOs, which stands for Renewable Fuels of Non-Biological Origin. And then the sustainability criteria for those RFMBOs are further defined or refined in 2 delegated acts, where the European Commission has already published a draft on both, and hopefully they will be enforced by the upcoming months. And the first delegated act, or the draft of the delegated act on Article 27, sets the sustainability criteria for electricity being used for renewable power fuel production. And the delegated act on Article 28 sets the greenhouse gas calculation methodology for those RFMBOs, which also aims for 70% greenhouse gas reduction compared to the fossil baseline. And it also sets the eligible carbon sources for e-fuels. So then for RFMBOs, you would also need to get a sustainability certificate issued in order to benefit from certain state aid, for example, or in order to get the hydrogen volumes counted towards renewable energy targets. And for those sustainability certificates, there is now a union days planned, which is also the aim set by the RED II. And the aim of this union database is to store all sustainability certificates, not only for green hydrogen or e-fuels, but also for biofuels, for example, in a centralized database within the EU. And the aim is to prevent double counting, for example, when you trade those certificates across border. And the implementation of this union database shall be finalized by the end of this year. And then there was also recently a Repower EU package published by the European Commission. And the aim of this Repower EU package is to get more independent from Russian gas. So the renewable energy targets have been set even more ambitiously as they were before. So in the transport sector now, there is a sub-target foreseen for renewable power fuels of 5.7%, and before it was 2.6%. And in the industry, the sub-target is now 78% renewable power fuel input, and before it was 50%. So now I want to talk about those delegated acts, which I have mentioned a bit more in detail, how they look like. And first, I want to start with the one on the sustainability or renewable electricity. So this follows different principles, which I want to introduce first. There is an additionality criteria foreseen, which says that only additionally produced or implemented electricity capacities shall be utilized for the hydrogen production. So there is no interference with the current renewable electricity sector. Then there is a temporal correlation foreseen, which stands for the timely match between the renewable hydrogen and the renewable electricity production. There is a geographical correlation. That means that the renewable electricity shall be consumed where it is produced. And there is also a phase-in period foreseen. So until the end of 2026, there will be softer sustainability criteria, and then with the new year of 2027, they will be more stricter. And there will be also a sunset clause implemented, which means that sustainability requirements will be reduced for those countries where they are no longer necessary. So that means that countries with already very high renewable energy shares do not have, for those countries, the sustainability requirements for RFMBOs are reduced. And then in this delegated act, there are different cases or different variations foreseen how you could prove that your hydrogen or your e-fuel is actually green. So the first one is that there is a direct connection between the electricity plant and the electrolyzer, and then you would need to also prove an additionality criteria on top of that, or your electrolyzer is connected indirectly to the power plant via the grid. And in this case, you have three different options. Either your renewable energy share in your electricity grid is 90%, and then automatically your RFMBO is classified as green. Unfortunately, in Germany, this is not the case. This is maybe the case in Norway or in Sweden. And then the second option would be to sign PPAs for your electricity inputs. And this electricity also has to fulfill a criterion on additionality, temporal and geographical correlation. And your fourth option is system serviceability, which means that your electrolyzer fulfills the purpose of balancing the grid. So in order to prevent grid congestion. So now I want to dive even more in detail for the direct connection. For example, you have two options to prove that you consumed renewable electricity. The option one is that you prove that there is an actual direct connection to a green power plant. And option two is that your electrolyzer and your power plant are located at the same plant or are part of one plant. And you also need, on top of that, you need to fulfill the additionality criterion, which means that your power plant must not be older than 36 months before the electrolyzer. And when you aim to establish additional electrolysis capacities, you must realize them within 24 months after the commissioning of the initial installation. Then when you are connected to the grid, when the electrolyzer is connected to the grid, as already mentioned, either your electricity grid has a renewable energy share of 90%, this is here option one, or you sign a PPA, which is equivalent to 100 of PPAs, plural, which are equivalent to 100% renewable power inputs for your hydrogen production. Then now we are still in the PPA case, you also would need to prove the additionality criterion, but this will only be enforced from the 1st of January 2027. So this is also part of this phase-in period, which I mentioned earlier. And here you have to ensure that your power plant is not older than 36 months compared to the electrolyzer. And if you aim to set up additional electrolysis capacities, they must be added a maximum of 36 months after the commissioning of the initial installation. Then also from 2027 onwards, the electricity plant must not have received any CAPEX or OPEX state aid except for repowered installations. So repowered installations are now installations that are where you invested a 30% CAPEX. So you conducted a 30% CAPEX investment compared to a new installation. And then you could, even if this plant received subsidies or state aid in the past, you could still now produce green hydrogen from it. Then the temporal correlation is until the end of 2026 set at 1 month. That means that the electricity can be produced 1 month prior to the hydrogen. And from the 1st of January 2027 onwards, this temporal correlation is set at 1 hour. So here you have 3 options. Option one is that, as I said, the electricity must not be or must be produced 1 hour prior, a maximum of 1 hour prior to the hydrogen. Option two is that you use a storage asset which was charged within this 1 hour. And option 3 would be that during this hour, during the 1 hour period, the price of electricity on the single day ahead mark was lower or equal to 20 euros per megawatt hour, or lower than 0.36 times the price of an EU ETS allowance, which is a CO2 certificate. Then referring to the geographical correlation, so the set area where electrolyzer and electricity plants must be located, there are also 3 options foreseen. One is that both plants must be located in the same bidding zone. So the bidding zone is electricity market design in the EU, and bidding zones look very different in the EU. So for example, in Germany, the bidding zone equals the national territory. So we have only 1 bidding zone, but in Italy, for example, they have several bidding zones. Then there is an option 2, which says that you could consume electricity from a neighboring bidding zone when the electricity prices on the day ahead market are equal or higher. And option 3 is that you could consume electricity from a neighboring bidding zone when it is an offshore bidding zone. And then now a completely alternative case again to the first 2 I mentioned, so to the 90% renewable electricity share and to the PPA case, is the system serviceability, which means that your electrolyzer fulfills the purpose of balancing the electricity grid. So here the electricity taken from the grid must need to be consumed during an imbalance settlement. And in order to prove that, so this needs to be proven by the national transmission system operator. And it also needs to be proven that the power generating facilities using renewable energy sources were downward redispatched. And this was the delegated act on the renewable electricity. And now I shortly switch to the delegated act on the greenhouse gas calculation methodology, Article 28, Red 2. So here we have this greenhouse gas emission equation, which looks like the follows. You have the total emission, which are equal to the emission inputs, the emissions from processing, transport and distribution, the end use, and carbon capture and storage. And this equation was already used for the biofuel sector within the RED, so a regulatory framework prior to RED 2. But it has been a little bit modified to RFMBO. So what has changed? Only this factor, the production input factor, has changed, because now here we distinguish between rigid and elastic production inputs. And in order to also be able to calculate the actual greenhouse gas reduction, because as you remember from what I said before, we need to realize a 70% greenhouse gas reduction. You need to compare it to the fossil baseline of 94 grams CO2 per megajoule. So now what does rigid and flexible production input mean? So when we take the electricity source as an example, we would ask the question, was the electricity additionally produced? If the answer is yes, then it's classified as elastic, and then we can count it with the emission value of the actual renewable electricity, which in the frame of the European Union and the regulatory framework there would be 0. But if we would go and ask the question, what's the renewable electricity, was the renewable, electricity already counted towards renewable energy targets? And the answer would be yes. Or if the production input source is a waste stream, then it would be rigid. And in terms referring to electricity source, if it is classified as rigid, then we would calculate, so we would account for this electricity source with the emission value of the electricity grid, which in Germany is in the current draft set at 124 gram CO2 per megajoule. So it makes a big difference if the production input is classified as rigid or flexible. And then other DINA activities on the question of certification and hydrogen certification are that we published by the beginning of this year a report together with the World Energy Council, which is called Global Harmonization of Hydrogen Certification. Here we compared 11 global hydrogen standards in California, in China, Japan, Australia, the UK, the EU, and so on and so forth. And in order to assess how harmonized they actually are, and which is an interesting question to ask when you want to trade globally. And then we also published a RegATrace report on how to actually prove those sustainability criteria. So what kind of information could be needed, because at this stage, the European Commission still gives very little guidance on this question. We also have we operate the Global Alliance Power Fuels, where you can become a member of. And they also on their website publish very interesting reports about market developments and, for example, water consumption of RFMBOs and so on and so forth. And we are currently also developing a blockchain-based certification system for e-fuels together with Siemens Energy and TÜV Süd. And if you're interested to learn more about this project, then I recommend you to scan this QR code. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Now or later, of course.
Thank you so much, Katerina. Thank you. I was really enjoying that presentation. I mean, we had to stop, but if we had time, we would have gone on and on. Thank you so much, Katerina. And I'm sure the audience is also feel the same way I feel. And I'm sure you've learned a lot. And just to mention again, before I go on to the last speaker, you can put your questions up on Slido. I will drop the link once I finalize my introductions, and put your questions up there, and you will get responses as soon as possible. All right, finally, I will be introducing the last speaker for today's webinar, and that is Opeyemi Olaniran. Opeyemi is the principal partner at Donatus Technology Consulting Services, and they offer consulting, advisory, engineering, and project management services in energy to clients in the public sector, telecoms, and hospitality. Today, Opeyemi is going to be giving us a rundown, letting us know about the projects, deployed hydrogen projects in Nigeria from the project management overview. So Opeyemi, over to you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. My name is Opeyemi Olaniran, and I'll basically be walking us through what a project developer's perspective, would be when it comes to development of green hydrogen in Nigeria. Give me a second, I'll put my screen up. Yes. So I'll jump straight into it. So basically, my discussion would be around, like I did mention, a project developer's view around, development of green hydrogen in Nigeria. Okay, yeah. So I'll do a bit of just run through a few of the slides towards the end of my presentation. I would talk around the project methodology that we are adopting as we think about, developing green hydrogen in Nigeria as well. I'd also like to say thank you also to the AHK team for reaching out and giving us the opportunity also to speak about our work in the green hydrogen space as well. A few other acknowledgements. The H2Diplo office in Nigeria has been super helpful. The GIZ team based in Nigeria, and my friend Chigozie Nweke-Eze, who works in one of the research institutes in Germany, has also been very, very influential to how we're thinking and actually structuring out our project here as well. So jumping straight into it, there are myths around hydrogen, and this is just some fun facts around hydrogen being the silver bullet to fixing all the energy access problems in Nigeria. Another myth is hydrogen is new and it's not well understood, and there's some school of thought that says it might be mainstream in 50 years or so. Both of these myths are wrong. Hydrogen will not fix the energy access problems in Nigeria. It's basically the focus for hydrogen would be to decarbonize heavily dependent fossil fuel industry users in Nigeria. And as one of the presenters had said earlier on, hydrogen has probably been in existence for over 200 years. So it's quite well understood, and there's also a lot of research work that continues to unveil safety, application of use and all that as well. This is also something that I wanted to share. There's this advert that was running in Nigeria. So Bank PHP was a bank, I think was founded in the early 2000s. It doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But they had this advert at the time, and it was running and said one day cars will run on water. And I think it was just a pitch from them to be very different. But today we're seeing applications not directly on water, but hydrogen being able to power fuel cells that can actually run the transportation sector as well. Colors of hydrogen, I think I'll just talk through this very briefly so that I move, I'm also aware of time, move quickly into the more project focused discussions as well. So hydrogen has this spectrum of colors depending on how it's produced and the input energy that goes into it as well. Our focus for this conversation is green hydrogen, which if done with renewable energy has no greenhouse gas emissions as well. Application and use cases, petrochemical, fertilizer. I think for these ones, basically just an overview of these industries that are very, very dependent on leveraging fossil fuel, to operate. Hydrogen is being looked at to actually help to decarbonize these industries as well. This particular slide, I think helps with, just the general understanding of the considerations that need to be taken when a green hydrogen project is being looked at. And on the other hand, it talks about, the requirements. So on one side, we're looking at how do we power green hydrogen, how do we produce it, how do we store, and potentially how do we transport hydrogen as well. And this has all kinds of different conversations globally going on about it as well. I think some of it Kai had touched on in his own presentation much earlier on as well. The advantage for Nigeria in this space also is that we have vast experience in the oil and gas sector. There's abundant renewable energy sources, wind and solar potential. I would mention later on, we still need to do a significant amount of work to moving our renewable energy investments into the gigawatt space as well. Availability of large expanse of land, established coastal infrastructure which means that in the event that we are looking to export, we do have the infrastructures across the West Africa, across the coast bordering the Atlantic, where we do have established infrastructure for export purposes as well. Also, we do have the opportunity, because we've also developed quite well in the oil and gas sector. So being able to find resources that would be able to move, with little retraining to similar industries, which will now be in the green hydrogen space, is also an advantage for us on this side. From a focus area perspective, these areas are things that are, being globally still being debated. Regulation is one. What does that also mean for us from Nigerian perspective? Do we have the frameworks in place to be able to utilize, incentivize, and trade, hydrogen as well? I am aware that on the public sector side, there are interministerial committees that are currently running, and there's also a lot of advocacy work where we also bring in some of the private sector work to also complement, the public sector efforts that are currently also going on as well. One of the things that had also been mentioned earlier was also around, how do we look at some of the materials and properties that are going to be required to be able to move hydrogen or store it from one place to the other. Those are also still issues that are being discussed globally, as well. I'd like to, pause a bit on this particular area. Let me get this out of the way. Hopefully it doesn't stand here. Currently, we do have this Nigerian-Morocco international cooperation where there is a fertilizer production plant being with this partnership between Nigeria and Morocco. And it's a fairly large facility being built in the south-south part of Nigeria. And the thinking today, is also that as we see this, this infrastructure being built out to be able to provide ammonia and fertilizer, will there be an opportunity for us to repurpose this this for a green ammonia scenario as well? These are conversations that, at some point will need, to be had. Also, a second here. Hold on. Okay, my screen got frozen there. So there's also the gas pipeline between Nigeria and Morocco. It's 5,600 kilometers long. And the thinking also here is that if Morocco is at the very tail end of North Africa, very close to Europe as well, and the thinking is to say that if this gas line is built, could there potentially be an opportunity to use this pipeline, that infrastructure also to, transport green hydrogen from Nigeria into Europe as well. So from a project developer's methodology, and this basically is our journey, and we're basically just sharing what our journey has looked like from this perspective. And on one hand is, at the start, the thinking is there is demand local and there's demand from an export perspective as well. From this perspective, we will need to have the right partnership in place between the project developer. The public sector is critical in this particular area because large expanse of land, regulation, getting support from the regulators is also critical, and that's an important part that the public sector is able to play. The off-taker, which means that when we do produce the green hydrogen, who are the off-takers, who will consume it? Local demand and export purposes as well. There's a technology partner piece who's also there, which is the technology partners who build out the electrolyzers that will be required, and also the EPC components as well, which will be the guys who could actually build out the green hydrogen plant. And also financing is also critical, from that perspective. So in our opinion, this is really the essential mix of the right partnership that you would have in place. And this is a public-private partnership, from that perspective. In all the other announcements that we've also seen, the public-private partnership has also been quite critical, in those conversations as well. There is a lot of studies that also still need to be done around location, access to land, the water source. There's, the conversation around, the water source, if it's from, the ocean or near the coast, how do we deal with desalination? I'm glad to also announce that, at least based on the information that we have, there's a lot of technology that doesn't significantly add, to the overall cost of producing green hydrogen from a water desalination perspective. And then also the investments that also have to be made, from the renewable energy perspective as well. Being able to also ensure that we have, a really deep understanding of the different components will also go a long way in helping with the success of these projects as well. I think something I left off here that I should probably put in a revised version that also has been mentioned is that we also go into the risk assessment, which is now around safety of how do we actually manage these plants, even when they are delivered as well. I'd go through, the engineering design has to be in place once we understand what we're trying to build out. And also, at some point, from an off-taker perspective, we also need to start to figure out how do we build hydrogen purchase agreements, which are probably long-term agreements that, we are able to sign with off-takers that will be able to consume whatever it is that you've produced over a period of time. As we have mentioned as well, there is also the conversation around how do we also transport, these things, but these are still conversations that are still, ongoing as well. From a funding perspective, when the business case is put together, at some point we would need to be able to have a funding partner that will be able to commit to the capital expenditure that needs to happen to actually make the project, work as well. From a procurement perspective, at this point in time, procurement will have to be done. Acquisition of electrolyzers, depending on the hardware or technical partners that you would be going on with as well, and then all the other things around permits, access to water bodies that you would be able to use as the feedstock into the electrolysis process to be able to create green hydrogen as well. So for us, this basically has been what that our view has been as we go along. And as I did mention, we are still learning. We're still, unearthing, these different opportunities every day. So project announcement, we're very optimistic and bullish about this. We do have a strategic public-private partnership on green hydrogen in the pipeline. We expect to have some announcement, at least to announce the partnership in the Q4 2022 or Q1 2023 timeline. I can't give you a lot of the details now because it's still under discussions. But the focus also would be around, stimulating local demand. What will the export, trade market also potentially look like? Capacity building is also really very critical in this particular conversation that we're also looking at. And the thinking is, how do we also partner with academia and industry, to be able to ensure that when we're building the right capacity, if we do build out the green hydrogen plants, we have the competence in country to be able to support and run these facilities, as we go along. So, stay tuned, more to hear from this, hopefully very soon as well. This is going back, it's going forward. Yes, so I think for us, also just kind of sharing our learning opportunities, here as well. We've done a lot of interactions with our equipment vendors who produce electrolyzers, and Napta is one. We've also had some interactions with Siemens Energy as well. We also have a strong partnership also with an EPC company who's also done some significant amount of work in Southeast Asia that we're also working with. We've done lessons learned, which I think I'll share a bit of that in this slide as we go along, with a project in Chile as well. At the Centro Nacional, they piloted, I think basically this organization focuses on piloting new innovations and then just trying out and learning and then looking at how potentially they would be able to scale it out. The Namibia project is also one to highlight. They've done a significant amount of interesting work in that place as well. And then I think also the opportunity to have also attended the German African Energy Summit earlier on in June in Hamburg. I think also helped with answering a lot of questions that we had and shaping, our project mindset as we've gone along as well. The next slide, I'm not sure why my slides get stuck. Yes, so lessons learned. So I'll quickly talk through this. So we had this session with the team that built out this green hydrogen facility out of Chile. And basically the focus industry was the mining sector. And basically they wanted to use a fuel cell system to power the perimeter lighting of that particular mine. So they basically went ahead and built out a green hydrogen plant. So I'm able to produce 3 kilograms of hydrogen per day. They were able to also connect both redundant and on-site power. The part that you can see here on the right here is the on-site solar installation that actually runs the electrolyzer on premise as well. They were also able to retrofit a pickup truck with 4 storage cylinders, because from where the hydrogen is being produced to the mining site was about 10 or 12 kilometers. So when the hydrogen is produced and stored, they're able to actually transport it from where it's being produced to the mines as well. Something I'm very happy to hear, when the safety side was being spoken about was, we did ask that, from a safety standard perspective, what's being used, and they said, LNG safety standards was basically adopted, for this particular, installation as well. So I've put up the LinkedIn link to the announcement for this particular green hydrogen, pilot project, and I think it'll be really cool, for everyone to take some time and actually, have a look at it as well. So my last slide is this. Sorry. My last slide is this, and it basically talks about go-dos. What do we need to do quickly? We still need a significant amount of gigawatt capacity renewable energy deployment, solar and wind, that's going to help us to be able to move towards industrial scale production of green hydrogen. Capacity building, I think, is super, super critical as well. With academia, we can't afford to leave them behind, and the industry as well. Like I did mention, regulation is ongoing with at the public sector level, where conversations have been had and helping us to develop green hydrogen, strategy and how we would actually run with it as well. I believe some of that work will also feed into the energy transition plan, for Nigeria as well. Stimulating local demand and also understanding, how we would help local consumers to actually move from, move towards adopting green hydrogen as well. And what do we have in place for, businesses to be able to move in that direction? Signing bilateral agreements and international corporations, very, very critical, because off the top of that, then we are able to now start to build the bridges across export trade, across being able to also transfer, knowledge, to Nigeria as well. And then, like I did mention earlier, building consortia, private-public partnerships that, will be the right partnerships that would help us, get across the line, very quickly. That's my last slide. And thank you very much for listening. Sorry, my slides haven't been great, but yeah, it's done from my side.
Thank you so much, Opeyemi. Very insightful, once again, insightful presentation. I mean, Really excellent job. Thank you so much. At this point, I believe that the audience, you've really taken home a lot of things, and I'm excited because I've gotten to learn a lot myself this morning. All right, we are wrapping up, but before we do, we have a few questions. I can see some questions on Slido. I can also see some questions on the Zoom platform. So I'll just take one or two because we are already almost out of time. So let me just quickly take this one. I think this is for Dr. Kai. Okay, so he's asking, this is from Olukayode. Olukayode is asking, may I know how safe is the operation of the likes of HPS/PICEA been? May I know how safe the operation of the likes of HPS/PICEA? May I know how safe it's been? Dr. Kai, that's directed to you.
Can you repeat it? I didn't get the message fully, or the question fully. Can you hear me?
Hey, Dr. Kai, did you get the question?
Not fully.
Okay, let me take it again. It says, may I know how safe is the operation of the likes of HPS and PICEA been? How safe the operations have been? I'm thinking.
Yeah, I didn't get
maybe
the
Olukayode. Okay, maybe Olukayode, you would want to just throw more light on that question, right? You might just throw a little more light on that question, and then I'll take another one for Dr. Kai as well, while we wait for you to throw more light on that question. Okay, so on Slido, Dr. Kai, Chima is asking, according to your presentation, assuming the specific properties of hydrogen and hydrogen systems are properly addressed, how do we practically address this? So your presentation says that assuming the specific properties of hydrogen and hydrogen systems are properly addressed. So Chima is asking, how do we practically address this? Thank you.
Yeah. In principle, you are doing that by doing risk analysis. There are different methods available how you do such risk evaluations, like hazard method or failure mode and evaluation analysis. There exist different tools where you address specifically various topics and finally come to an overall evaluation of your system. Different classical methods for that exist.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kai. I have another question. This is directed to Katerina. Katerina, Fisayo is asking that, what would you say? Sorry. Okay, so what would you say is a low-hanging fruit for Nigeria as a country to start producing and exporting hydrogen? What would you say is a low-hanging fruit for Nigeria as a country to start producing and exporting hydrogen? Katerina, thank you.
So when you want to benefit from the state aid and for greenhouse gas, from the, for example, greenhouse gas emission quota in Germany, which is actually currently, I would say, one of the attractive markets. So this is the mobility market, to sell it as a fuel. Then I think there are probably two options available. The first one would be the direct connection, but then of course you would need to consider the production cost, because according to our calculations, the direct connection between the power plant and the electrolyzer is still rather expensive, but I don't know if this is also the case in Nigeria. And the second option would probably be the PPA. And then, of course, if you are able to implement this this project, a green hydrogen project now before 2027, you have far better conditions, because because of this phase-in period I mentioned. You don't have to fulfill the additionality criterion, and I think this is something, this would be definitely a low-hanging fruit.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Katerina. I can see a couple of questions here, but we are very pressed for time, so apologies. I may not be able to take any more questions, but you can always send us a mail to the Energy Department and we'll forward it. So once again, thank you very much. At this point, I will be handing over to the head of the Competence Center, Energy and Environment, Andrew Aye, to go on with the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you very much, the audience, and again to our esteemed speakers. This has truly been an insightful session, and I'm quite sure that many of us have already had the opportunity to learn a bit more about hydrogen and its potential use in Nigeria, again, attaching to it the principles of sustainability as well as safety to it. Again, my kind appreciation to the Konrad Adenauer Stifftung for them helping us to actually plan this session and also supporting us aggressively to achieve the purpose of this webinar. Again, also to you, the audience, for asking quite engaging questions that will again steer our conversations or our planning to the next webinar or topics based on hydrogen. So without much to be said, I would say that if you have any further questions, which again, I need to apologize due to time constraints, I would want to say that please feel free to send us an email and we'll do our very best to get you the responses coming in together with all the recorded videos and all the necessary details regarding the presentations and all that you need. So again, thank you, and we look forward to having you on board next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you. Bye.